Hi, everybody who's joined us here today. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's expert panel on the heart share of stress and sleep. This topic is so critical to focus given that so many young people are experiencing rising levels of stress and disrupted sleep patterns that directly affect long-term heart health. As I mentioned, my name is Maria, and Vicky and I are going to be the moderators for this event. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly introduce ourselves and the organization that is hosting this event. Me and Vicky are here today representing the Guardians of the Heart, a student-led nonprofit whose mission is to empower young people with the knowledge, tools, and resources to take control of their heart health from an early age. Today's conversation will center around the link between heart health and mental health in young people, with a special focus on the role that sleep plays. We are incredibly fortunate to have an outstanding group of experts with us who will be sharing their knowledge on this crucial topic. I'm going to pass it on to Vicky to introduce our panelists.
Okay, so first we have Dr. Naomi Shah, a professor of medicine and artificial intelligence and human health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She is board certified in internal medicine, pulmonary, critical care, and sleep medicine, and is currently the chair of the American Thoracic Society Sleep and Respiratory Neurobiology Assembly. She is a standing member of the National Institutes of Health Study Section and is nationally recognized for her contributions to sleep and cardiovascular research. Second, Dr. Maia Brink is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Behavioral Cardiovascular Health at Columbia University Irving Medical Center. As a health psychologist, she researches how psychological health and sleep contribute to recovery in patients after acute cardiovascular events such as strokes, acute coronary syndrome, and cardiac arrest. She received her PhD in psychology from Stanford University, which focused on sleep and emotions in daily life in adults. Next, Dr. Dennis Goodman is the director of integrative medicine, the founder of the Preventive Medicine Lecture Series, and a clinical professor of medicine in the Department of Cardiology and Preventive Medicine at NYU. He has published many research articles in addition to many books on heart health, including magnesium, omega-3s, and vitamin K2. He is an international speaker and has been a visiting professor throughout South Africa, Asia, Israel, and Europe to promote global preventive medicine and is joining us today from Africa. Next, Dr. Kara Pensabene is Mastercard's Global Medical Director, serving as the primary medical advisor to the organization and supporting their employees' health and well-being. She has more than 10 years of clinical experience in internal medicine, primary care, and telemedicine. Dr. Kara serves on the board of directors of the American Heart Association, Eastern States Region, and Westchester and Fairfield counties. She lives in Westchester County with her husband and her 3 young kids. Next, Dr. Shelby Harris is a clinical psychologist and sleep specialist in private practice in New York. She is board certified in behavioral sleep medicine and treats a wide variety of sleep anxiety and depression issues using evidence-based non-medication treatments. In addition to her academic writings and research on insomnia, narcolepsy, sleep apnea, circadian issues, and sleep in older adults, she is the author of 2 popular self-help books, The Woman's Guide to Overcoming Insomnia from 2019 and The Essential Guide to Children's Sleep in 2025. Finally, Dr. Praveen Raju is the medical director for the sleep division at the Northern Westchester and Phelps Hospitals with extensive expertise in sleep medicine. He earned his medical degree from Osmania Medical College in India. Dr. Raju completed his residency and pulmonary fellowship at Bronx Lebanon Hospital, followed by a critical care fellowship at Montefiore Hospital.
Thank you, Vicky. And thank you again for joining us today, panelists. Vicky and I, as we mentioned, will be guiding the discussion through some pre-prepared questions, and we'll end with a Q&A session. So, everyone who's joined us here today, feel free to type in the Q&A box with any questions you may have. So, first, let's start with some background. Panelists, from your area of expertise, how would you describe the link between stress, sleep, and heart health? And how does your work give you a unique perspective on this connection? Dr. Shah, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. First of all, I just want to congratulate you guys on the panel and the work that you've put in. I have 2 teenagers in high school, and they've been hearing about how much work you guys are doing compared to what they're doing. So kudos to you guys for all the hard work you've put into this. And I just also want to give a shout out to Dr. Harris, who's a longtime colleague of mine. I've known her for the longest time, and she's just a dear friend, but also a fantastic, um, uh, CBTI expert nationally. So really happy to be here on the panel. I would just say that in my practice, I see a lot of patients who are initially referred to me with sleep apnea, which is obstructive sleep apnea. It's a condition where people stop breathing in their sleep. It's a mechanical obstruction of the upper airway that results in oxygen saturations dropping throughout the night, which, as you can imagine, critical organs like the heart don't get as much oxygen. And so we have spent a lot of decades with a focus on that condition and how it adversely affects the heart. What I have learned and our research and others have shown in the last couple of decades is that, the association that we saw in observational studies for that condition hasn't really panned out to be as critical as I would say that sleep duration, sleep quality probably plays in heart health. And I think that my practice, even though we focus on sleep apnea, we are now shifting our attention on sort of sleep as a whole and really optimizing sleep duration. As you know, most Americans are not sleeping enough. And so I spend a lot of my time in my practice, of course, talking about sleep apnea and the evidence, which is the beauty of an academic institution like Mount Sinai, where patients seek us out for that kind of information, but also more importantly around just getting enough sleep hours. And I have patients who sleep 4 to 5 hours because they have two jobs. And I've followed them now for over a decade. And unfortunately, we do start to see the cardiometabolic toll that short sleep and poor sleep takes on them. And that includes things like atrial fibrillation, myocardial infarction, stroke, diabetes, hypercholesterolemia. So the whole, and the entire panel, and not that sleep duration is independently associated with each of these in a definitive way, in a causal way, but I think it plays a role in all of these cardiometabolic outcomes. So I'll stop there and happy to elaborate at a point later. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Ten Brink, we would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to the organizers. I agree with Dr. Shah. This is spectacularly well organized, and it's an honor to be with the rest of you guys on this panel, who are all super interesting and doing cool work and serving patients in all kinds of awesome ways. So I am a psychologist by training, and my work sits kind of at the intersection of psychology and cardiology. So I study how our ability to regulate or cope with our emotions is related to our sleep, how people respond emotionally to bodily sensations, including breathing and heart rate, and how daily fluctuations in our mood impacts our health behaviors like sleep and physical activity. And I apply that right now in my work at Columbia University Irving Medical Center to understanding patients recovering from acute cardiovascular events such as strokes and acute coronary syndrome and cardiac arrest, and really understand how psychological health and emotion regulation and sleep patterns are all part of recovering cardiovascular function. And one of the really important pieces of work that my colleagues' research has demonstrated is that post-traumatic stress disorder is really common after people experience heart attacks or strokes. And this is just in the person who experienced it themselves, can be in their family members, and many people who have had heart disease or acute cardiovascular events impact their family members will also develop kind of stress and trouble sleeping and sleep complaints. And it's even interesting that people who don't end up having a real stroke or a heart attack but come in thinking they might have one are themselves at risk for a lot of sleep problems and psychological distress. And so one of the things I study is how positive psychological factors, like having a sense of optimism and purpose in life, and positive outlook, can be kind of a buffer for people going through some of those experiences. And the last thing I'll say is maybe I have a particularly unique perspective because I myself was a young patient. I had a stroke in my 20s. And so I kind of see that uncertainty and scary period that patients might go through and the families might go through kind of on the inside. So I'm happy to talk about any of my work more in detail, but I'm also mindful to leave time for others.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Now let's move on to Dr. Goodman.
Thank you very much. I'll second what the previous speakers have said. Thank you to all of you for this podcast that we're doing, this webinar. I think it's really great to educate people because that's so important. And thank you for your hard work. I'm going to second what both of them said. I think Dr. Shah did a great job of just introducing what are the things that happen when you don't get enough sleep. I just want to point out as a cardiologist that it's important to ask people how much they're sleeping. And I think Dr. Shah was alluding to this. If you sleep for less than 5 hours or more than 9 hours at night in general, that is a modifiable, because you can change it, risk factor for heart disease. And just to basically amplify what Dr. Shah said, we know that when you're not getting enough sleep, you land up with a situation where you've got an increased risk for high blood pressure, because you don't get that evening dipping that you're supposed to get. You don't get a chance to do that. It affects autonomic tone. You get vascular dysfunction. You get metabolic pathways that get disrupted, as well as inflammatory markers that are activated. And all that drives atherosclerosis and arrhythmias. So we are very in tune to the fact that when people come with, for example, atrial fibrillation, Dr. Shah, I think it's imperative that we screen them for obstructive sleep apnea, especially when they actually tell you that they're snoring or they're having trouble staying awake during the day, because there's no point doing an ablation and putting them through that whole procedure if you don't treat the underlying cause of the atrial fib. And there are many patients that if we detect this before, we can actually get rid of or treat the atrial fibrillation successfully without an ablation, and we treat the obstructive sleep apnea. So that's an important thing to say. We've got this evidence from the Nurses' Health Study that nurses, thousands of nurses, hundreds of thousands nurses have been followed, and they've shown that there's like a 40% increase in cardiovascular risk in people who don't get enough sleep. So I just want to point out that sleep is essential. We don't ask enough about it. We don't screen enough for obstructive sleep apnea. And there's so many important reasons to get enough sleep. Now, the big issue is how do we help people that aren't getting enough sleep? And I think that's for another question and maybe another webinar, but there's an absolute increased incidence of cardiovascular disease in people that are not getting enough sleep. And it starts when you're young. So kudos for highlighting this important, very important risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Kara, would you like to continue?
Of course. And I think at this point, we may all be echoing what each other say. But again, this is an excellent production with very quality panelists, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And thank you for having me today. And clinically, I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Dr. Goodman and Dr. Shah also said, but add my corporate medical director perspective, hopefully, to it a little bit. So as a physician who now works inside a global corporation, I see cardiovascular risk not just in exam rooms, but in meeting schedules and in time zones and in inbox timestamps. And if I could prescribe one medication for heart health that costs nothing and scales globally, it would be sleep. And I have been on my own sleep journey for the past 2 years and have been bringing my employees at MasterCard on a sleep journey along with me. So I am doing the best I can to prescribe sleep, and the workplace conditions and school routines and environments that protect it. As Dr. Shah and Goodman said, physiologically, we know that chronic stress activates the sympathetic nervous system and what we call that HPA axis, which is the body's central stress response system. And it increases cortisol and blood pressure and heart rate and systemic inflammation. And when that stress becomes chronic, or how I talk about it at work, cumulative, and is paired with insufficient or fragmented sleep, we see these downstream cardiometabolic effects and consequences that the doctors spoke about: hypertension, insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, increased cardiovascular risk. And from my perspective, reduced employee productivity and presenteeism and increased medical leaves and, you know, less people able to fully perform the essential functions of their job. And we know the sleep isn't passive. So it's when our blood pressure will dip, it's when our endothelial function kind of restores, our heart rate variability improves, and those inflammatory markers recalibrate. And when sleep is shortened or disrupted, especially under that 5 hours that Dr. Goodman spoke about, we see measurable increases in these cardiovascular events. And what gives me this unique perspective is that I had the privilege of treating individual patients for many years, and now I have the privilege of looking at population level data within a corporate workforce, and I can see how kind of high performers, especially mid-career professionals, normalize sleep deprivation, just like doctors in medical training did. So it really relates to me. And I can say, you know, I used to also think I will sleep when I'm dead and that I can produce and do well and be a good doctor with no sleep. But recently, I have really understood the difference, and what actually happens when you sleep is what really led to that realization for me and hopefully for my employees. You know, we see our global teams working across time zones, quietly accumulating sleep debt. I'm regularly on calls with people from India or people from, you know, Dubai, and it is the middle of the night for them. Or likewise, I'll host a session for a mental health champions training with my AP colleagues, and it'll be the middle of the night for me. So we can see how sleep impacts corporate workforce and how it definitely impacts productivity and morale and culture. And it's not just psychological, it's operational. We're going to be looking at these types of things like workload design and workforce strategy and mobilization and meeting culture, and so much conversation about burnout prevention and access to preventive screening. So for me, the stress sleep heart connection, it's not theoretical, it's visible in claims data, blood pressure screenings, leave requests, medical emergencies in our offices globally for chest pain and severe headaches and different things all day, you know, and employee health narratives. But it's also deeply personal because I live and work in the same productivity ecosystem that I'm trying to redesign and support with better sleep habits.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Dr. Harris, do you have any other perspectives on this?
Yeah, a little bit. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I still see patients for anxiety and depression, but mostly have been in the sleep medicine field for well over 20 years now. And my main areas of specialty are in insomnia. So despite having adequate opportunity for sleep, people just can't sleep. And I work a lot with women who have sleep issues and have for a long time. And what we see a lot of the times is that when we're talking about stress, sleep, and heart health, when you're not sleeping enough, it lowers your ability to really deal with stress. So your coping mechanisms are really at a much lower level than they normally would be. And then the more that you have issues with coping mechanisms, right? You're doing more, you're more stressed. And then that can also lead to more poor behaviors in general when it comes to things that can in fact impact heart health as well. So we're thinking about diet, exercise, right? So when you're not sleeping well and not sleeping enough, there's literally an imbalance of hormones, ghrelin and leptin in your brain. You don't have the signal telling you that you're full, and you actually have more of the signal to keep eating. And what do we do when we're sleep deprived? We look for high fat, high energy foods. So we're eating more, we might not be working out as much, we're having more stress, and that can then like kind of just cycle with the sleep and the and mood issues that we see. And also, what we see a lot of times in the psychology field is that if you work to help improve someone's sleep, especially when it comes to insomnia, it actually helps before, like we do that sometimes first, and that can help with stress. It can help with depression. It can help with anxiety, even without necessarily going to medication or treatment for those other things. So they're all very related. And I deal with it day in and day out of my practice.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then finally, Dr. Raju, if you would like to talk on
Thank you
this.
for having me. It's a great program. Thank you for having me. And I echo with everybody what they have said great things about you guys. It's really a great program. And what I'm going to say is also what very similar to what everybody has said. I think in my practice, I've seen you say the same thing again and again, in 10 times, it's going to stick to the patient, right? So I think that's where we are. So I'm going to say the 10th time now. So hopefully it'll stick. Chronic stress, right? It activates the nervous system, like Dr. Goodman said, which raises the stress hormones. What that does is it disrupts the sleep. So if you have poor sleep, it increases the blood pressure, increases the inflammation, increases the strain on the cardiovascular system, right? This cycle repeats itself and causes eventually increases the risk for heart health. In my work, I mainly see sleep apnea is my main patient volume. Of course, I see insomnia and other sleep disorders, but that affect cardiovascular health. The main sleep disorder that I see is sleep apnea and decreased sleep time and quality, right? So those are the main ones. When sleep is fragmented, like Dr. Shah said, with low oxygen levels repeatedly overnight, it puts a stress on the heart, and that causes the cardiovascular problems in long term. And what I've seen is treating this and sleep habits, sleep apnea and sleep habits, improving them can lead to meaningful improvements in blood pressure, heart rhythms, and overall cardiovascular health.
Maria, can I make one other quick point? We're obviously all on the same page, but the big buzzword these days is longevity. And one of the things that's coming out very clearly, besides the obvious things that you should be doing, obviously having the right weight and exercising and eating healthy, there are three big things that are coming out to be really significant that we don't always think about and things you should do. One, for stress management, things like meditation. Sleep has become a crucial issue in terms of longevity. And the third one is socialization. Things that we don't always think about. The Harvard study showed that when people are connected, when people have a friend, when they've got family members, there's someone to live for and someone that cares about them. And when they're doing things to help other people. So I just thought I'd throw that out now, that sleep is right there with those other two very important things.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all of you. Building on everything that you've all shared so far, we're going to look into some specific factors. So, what role do you think screen time, caffeine, productivity culture have played in disrupting healthy sleep rhythms and consequently impacting heart health, particularly for younger generations? So, how about we go in reverse order for this one? So, maybe Dr. Roger would like to start off.
Sure, absolutely. So the screen time, right? So that's absolutely there everywhere, for all ages, right? All the way starting from my kids who are teenagers, so all the way to 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, right? So everybody's on the screen time. Everybody's on the phone until they go to bed, right? So that decreases your melatonin production and significantly disrupts your sleep, right? And it's not only young generation problem, I think it's everybody's problem. So that's one of the things I tell patients. The first thing is, when is the last time you put your phone down or work? Some of my patients are working until they go to sleep, right? So they're on the computer, and then they go to sleep immediately. So that's a big problem with initiating sleep and also disrupts the sleep quality. And because that causes them to be tired during the day, and what are they doing? High caffeine intake. So everybody says few cups of coffee, right? They won't even tell me how many cups. It's few cups, right? So they're drinking a lot of caffeine to compensate for it. And caffeine causes fragmented sleep. So it's just a cycle that goes again and again. Is next day it's more and more. And this fragments the sleep and causes increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. And then to add to that, the new productivity culture where, sleeping less is incentivized at work. And people tell me that I don't have time. I can sleep only 4 hours. And I think that kind of incentivizes at work. And people are like, oh, he's working so hard. He's sleeping only 4 hours to work the rest of the time. I think a lot of my patients give that as an answer that I don't have time to sleep. I have only 4 hours because they have 16 hours work days at work, right? So all this is causing significant problems with sympathetic nervous system activation, causing stress hormone levels and increased cardiovascular strain. And these are happening more earlier in life now. So in high school, college, there is need to do academics and also do sports. So to put everything in, they don't have enough time. So now what are they sacrificing? They're sacrificing on the sleep time, right? So they're going to bed so late, so they don't, and the school starts 7 o'clock, so they're waking up at 6, so they don't have time to sleep. So it's starting not only in the people who are working, but we are starting that culture way ahead in high school, right? So that's where the problem is. So I think we have to educate people that we have to have enough sleep time to decrease long-term cardiovascular health.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Harris, would you like to go?
Okay, I agree with everything Dr. Raj just said. So caffeine, all those things. So I'm not going to repeat all that on my end. But I think there's also a bigger issue that's going on. We're talking about young adults, right? A big part of my practice is working with adolescents and the school start times not aligning with their biological circadian rhythms. So what happens when we're talking about kids, they go to bed early, they wake up early, naturally. And then there's this natural transition to going to bed later, which is totally biologically it's just built in. Melatonin starts coming out later, the circadian pattern goes to bed later and wakes up later. Now, that goes completely against what most of the school start times are. And there in the sleep medicine field, we have a really big movement of trying to start school later is one big group that works with it. We're trying to shift school times. So to really change them. So I live in Briarcliff, and what we found was at the beginning of the pandemic, they actually started school at 9 a.m. for the high school students, and the teachers found that the kids were better rested. The parents found that the teenagers were better rested. They were doing better in school overall, despite all the stressors going on from the pandemic. So I worked with the superintendent. We were able in my small district to change the school start times. There are some states like California that have 8:30 as the bare minimum. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no school for high school and later middle school should start any earlier than 8:30. So in a way, we have to work on our productivity culture, right? We're working too late. The demands for these kids are so late. But then when it's time to actually go to sleep, to get up early enough for school, their biology doesn't often let them be able to physically fall asleep. So we have treatments that can help shift that circadian pattern for some people. And then we also have to think about like the culture of like some of the things that are going on. I gave a talk to my daughter's Girl Scout troop yesterday about just the healthy importance of sleep for 10-year-olds. And there were so many people that were like, I have to get up at 3 a.m. to go to a dance tournament tomorrow. And I have to get up at this time. And it's just like the sleep deprivation that's going on because of all the extracurriculars. And it's just setting everyone up for so much more complications. And it's just so much harder in general.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Dr. Care, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. And, again, echo what many of the panelists already shared. And I'm going to focus in on kind of the light exposure piece and the screen time. And, younger generations, we all are living in an environment of constant artificial light exposure. I'm sitting here with 5 different lights on in my office to make it bright enough for you to see me right now. And our circadian rhythm is anchored by light, especially blue light, detected by specialized photoreceptors in our retina that can signal the brain's master clock. This doesn't overtake the circadian rhythm patterns that are built in that Dr. Shelby just spoke about, but they're anchored in and impacted by light exposure. And morning blue light is essential. It does suppress your melatonin, increase your alertness, and sets your sleep schedule for the rest of the day, or it helps to set your sleep schedule for the rest of the day. But the issue isn't necessarily the blue light itself, it's the timing of it as well. And when we're exposed to high levels of blue light from screen time and other sources at night, laptops, our overhead lighting, our phones, we delay that melatonin release, and it can shift the circadian clock later, and it can shorten and fragment your sleep. And this is kind of part of what started my own deep dive around sleep. It actually started with an Aura ring where you have insight into your ability to measure how much you're sleeping and what type of sleep you're getting and how fragmented it is. And then I started thinking about the office lighting that we expose our employees to, or the fluorescent lighting in the schools, that our students work under, but particularly in these global hybrid environments, and how that can unintentionally contribute to circadian dysregulation and impact sleep. And then over time, as we know, the misalignment will impact our blood pressure and our inflammation, and all of that is what leads to the cardiovascular risk. So it's not just about the screen time. It's also kind of about respecting this biology, getting natural blue light if you can in the morning from the sky and the sun, and thoughtful evening light, right? Managing that blue light exposure and that screen time at night, in the evening, and including in our workplaces are really actually heart health strategies.
Thank you so much. Dr. Goodman, would you like to go next?
Well, I think it's almost all been said, but I think we should just sort of come up with some practical suggestions for people, because sometimes people think, and you pointed to this out, Dr. Raju, that these people who manage to say, oh, well, I don't need very much sleep, so I'm happy, I'm lucky. They're not lucky because they're not getting enough sleep to be really productive. And we got to point out to these people that if you're getting less than 5 hours, you're actually at increased, we should say it again, in cardiovascular risk, which means heart attacks, strokes, heart failure, and arrhythmias. Now, if they hear that, they may say, you know what, well, I'm not so happy about that. Let me try to get my 7 or 8 hours at night. So for me, what's important is telling people, we've all said this, you've got to cut out the screen and the TV and your phones at least an hour before you're trying to sleep. Because to look at your phone just before you're trying to sleep and something's going to upset you and you're trying to see if there's a message from work, then you can't fall asleep. Then you're getting anxious because you can't sleep. So now it's 1 a.m. and you're not sleeping. Really important to talk about sleep hygiene. I'm sure, Dr. Shelby, you're probably very good at doing that. And maybe that's an important thing for us to do as one of the webinars. But put your phone down, stop looking at TV. Maybe you read a book that helps you to fall asleep. And definitely you don't want to be drinking caffeine. For some people, most people know when they have an effect from caffeine. There's some people who can have a double espresso at 10 o'clock at night. It's got to do with the enzymes in the body and how you metabolize caffeine. So the people who have like a low level of an enzyme that metabolizes caffeine, they actually have very high caffeine levels after just 1 cup. So they don't want to take it. But the ones that are big, are very, fast metabolizers, they can have caffeine late at night. But I tell people, don't have caffeine after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, in general. And so I'm a believer that if you just educate people, put the phone down, stop watching TV, and cut out the caffeine, and definitely no alcohol, then you're much more likely to get your 7 or 8 hours sleep a night. We have to be telling people that's your goal.
Thank you so much. Dr. Brink, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I think I'll pull out the thread of some of the psychological impacts. So, one of the really key problems of using a phone before bed is hyperarousal. So the nervous system is kind of on. And often when we're looking at, the news or things on the internet, they're not calming and chilling us out. They're maybe freaking us out, or we're worried about, what are our friends doing? Or am I missing out on something? Or, it's not necessarily a calming stream of information coming through our phones. And so that elevates the heart rate, it kind of elevates stress hormones, it keeps the brain alert. And so we're kind of not getting a restful sleep. And it's very difficult to kind of turn off from that state and immediately expect yourself to fall asleep. And one of the other really important things that sleep is super important for, and my research is on, is about helping us do emotion regulation effectively. Kind of it's an underappreciated but really important role of sleep. Kind of it recalibrates the brain's amygdala, or sort of threat detector center. There are kind of strengthening of connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex to help with impulse control and emotional decision making. And we're processing our emotional memories during the night. And so if we don't get good sleep or it's disrupted, we don't get enough sleep, all of that good kind of processing, when we think of like sleep on it, wake up, you'll feel better in the morning, is not happening. As well, when we get short sleep or kind of disrupted sleep, the next day our amygdala is more ready to fire and kind of detect threat in neutral situations, and we have a harder time regulating our emotions and kind of modulating how we're feeling. So one of the actually key, public health problems of staying up late is that actually psychiatric issues can develop, as Dr. Harris mentioned, but also get worse if you're awake late at night. So there's a hypothesis that called the mind after midnight hypothesis that adolescents are particularly at risk for suicidal thoughts or kind of negative mental health at night because they're highly reactive, their reward sensitivity is changing, and their risk assessment gets a little worse. Negative thoughts can feel more convincing. And so we know that mental health and stress is a really big issue for high schoolers, kind of being pushed to be perfect or pushed to achieve a bajillion things in order to get their resumes ready for college. And so it's a really important again, modifiable behavior to address the real mental health risks of being up late kind of hyper aroused on your phone, when you're maybe more at risk for some kind of poor emotion regulation skills. If you're already someone who's struggling with, say, depression or low self-esteem or social anxiety, that's going to really be a time of night that you're sort of most at risk. And so that's, that all feeds into cardiovascular health down the line. Obviously, all that stress, all that cortisol, all that autonomic dysfunction is always kind of building up and having cumulative effects on the heart later on.
Thank you so much. And then finally, Dr. Shah.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just keep things really real, right? So I will talk, you asked about caffeine, you asked about culture, you asked about screen time. And, just a point that I want to make before I move into that is that, Dr. Goodman mentions 5 hours of sleep, which is the absolute sort of lowest cutoff, but really the American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends getting 7 to 9 hours. So I just want to put that on the record that 5 is low. And if you're getting less than 5, there's a lot of data that there's early mortality associated with it. But 7 to 9, and ideally closer to the 8 to 9, is what most adults need. So just want to mention that. Extracurricular activities for children for college applications is a big pain point for me, particularly because of what Dr. Harris mentioned. When you hear people waking up at 4 in the morning, doing homework, and then staying late and doing track, what colleges require out of kids, to me personally, seems counterintuitive to their mental health. So we in our family have made a decision a decade ago that they don't do extracurriculars that sacrifice their mental health or their sleep, irrespective of which college they get into. So that is, if there's a college scout on this or listening to this, this is important for you to note that if you're looking for students that are extra accomplished, they're sacrificing something, and that probably includes sleep and their mental health and increased stress. So we need to change the culture. We can't shame people for sleeping. We can't shame people at work for getting their 10 hours or 8 hours or whatever it is that they need, because guess what? They're probably going to be their highest performers, right? So at MasterCard, you rather have a person that slept 8 hours than somebody that slept 5, because they're probably going to make fewer mistakes based on the data we know. So I get 8 to 9 hours of sleep. I don't go to work until 10 if I haven't gotten my sleep, and that's on the record. And I honestly, at this point in my career, do not care because I perform when I get my sleep. And I just want to be very real because this is the conversation we need to be having. And the last thing I'm going to mention is that kids coming into school late, they're already stressed. Our kids are extremely stressed. Our high schoolers are extremely stressed. Let's not shame them for being late to school. There is a reason they're showing up late. So teachers and principals, if you're listening to this, please have a better problem-solving approach than disciplinary action for high schoolers showing up too late. And really, the bottom line is what Dr. Harris has accomplished needs to happen throughout. We need to have delayed school start times past 9 a.m. for all of our high schoolers, and you will see a lot of the problems that we're facing go away if they can just get their sleep and be kids, which is what we really want them to be. So I hope that I didn't offend anyone. I just wanted to talk straight from the heart. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody with those answers. So now moving on to um, no, away from individual learning behaviors, what community level programs or interventions have you observed that address stress, sleep, and heart health? And can you speak also about some of the challenges and successes in implementing these approaches? So we could start in the middle this time. So Dr. Kara, if you want to begin.
Yes, and here is my plug for some of the work that we do with the American Heart Association and with MasterCard. And, one of the most impactful interventions that I've seen in corporate and community settings begins as a bystander skill and a relatively newer one, which is hands-only CPR. While CPR is an emergency response intervention, the ripple effect is really awareness. It's shock a lot of the time, and then awareness, and it makes this cardiac risk immediate and very humanizing to people around it and empowering in a way as well. And the same is true of initiatives like our Go Red for Women or, the Westchester Heart Walk or a heart health panel that we hosted last week with the American Heart Association at MasterCard during Black History Month with our ERG about Black history and heart health. And when colleagues share their lived experiences, hypertension in their 40s, a heart attack, at 25, a stroke at work, while they were running a meeting, family history of premature heart disease, disparities affecting their communities, these lived experiences and sharing of that prevention becomes personal and it becomes mission driven, and in my role, I've learned that data informs, but it's really these stories that move people. And I, like Dr. Raju, can say something 10 times, 9 times over and over again. And my patients may or may not hear me. My employees may or may not hear me, but I do find that when there's a heart attack survivor that they can very much relate to, who's on the stage next to me, they hear her. And the challenge right now, today's the very last day of Heart Month. And the theme of Heart Month is actually you are the first responder until help arrives, really empowering everybody in the community, high schoolers, younger than that, all of us to take action in the event that we do see somebody, having a cardiac arrest and to perform that hands-only CPR and become comfortable with CPR. But the challenge is really sustaining momentum beyond Heart Month. Kristen, with the American Heart Association, we see a lot of us in February, and we're here to positively promote heart health. But the success happens when it's not a campaign. It's when you embed it into the culture, when you change the system, right? The school times, the things we're talking about, and the approach to and consideration for like overall well-being and mental health, right? In these pictures. So when you start talking about heart health in real human terms, that's when we kind of naturally start to then talk about stress and sleep and burnout and blood pressure. I was at an event for Go Red for Women last Tuesday, and we were there with heart survivors, and we're all there sharing our different sleep tips and heart tips and talking about our heart rate variability. And it starts around that kind of awareness of what can happen if you don't take care of your heart or if somebody doesn't perform that hands-only CPR. And for me, that's where prevention is really beginning, kind of not just in this culture, in the clinic, but in this culture that we're building together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kara. Dr. Harris, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've some of the issues that I've seen when it comes to community and community programs that are looking just from my area of specialty of like stress and sleep and mood in general, and then impacting heart health. We think about it with with every age, but like my area of practice is really trying to work. I work a lot with people who are just busy corporate careers. I work with people who are, I mean, when I was at Montefiore many, many years ago with Dr. Shah, and I was the person who was the go-to for sleep treatment and sleep. I gave like lectures on sleep to the residency program and the fellowship and all the trainees there at Einstein and Montefiore. And I'll never forget it. You know, we're trying to improve sleep habits, talk about shifts and how to address all that. And I'll never forget it. A surgeon stood up and said, but how can we trick our bodies into just surviving on less sleep and doing better? And it's like, it doesn't work that way. And we still have that message that's coming out at times. And, you know, I give talks sometimes at various corporate groups and law firms, and I'm trying to improve sleep health and talk about power napping, whatever we can do, which is not a substitute for nighttime sleep and good quality sleep, but yet they're still thinking about billable hours. And there's all these other things that are going on. So it's like we're trying more and more, but we also have to deal with the system, school start times, all those things that are really getting in the way of just even being able to prioritize sleep. And that, like Dr. Shah was talking about, the shaming of sleep, right? So we're moving in the right direction, but there's still the kind of just overall systemic issue that's going on. And one last thing I'll add is when we're talking about community programs and just trying to get more sleep health out there, there's an equity issue that is a big issue too, right? So people are talking about the best mattresses, the cooling tech, the watches, the rings, all the stuff to help people sleep better. But the fundamentals are really very basic. And so there's a messaging issue that's going on too of you have to spend all this money to be able to get better sleep, but really it should be something that's fundamental. We need to talk about it on a community level, not just to the people who can afford all those things as well. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. Dr. Raju, do you have any thoughts?
Um, I think, for me, probably workplace is where I think most of us are right. So workplace wellness initiatives probably should be high on the priority, and maybe it'll help not only for the sleep, for everything else, right? So exercise, diet, all these things, weight loss, right? So, yeah, everything is interconnected. If they provide more and more workplace wellness initiatives like free gym membership or free cooking classes or whatever helps the employees or everybody in the community, I think will have a great impact. And one other thing that will have a great impact, it's not a community based, but everybody goes to primary care, right? That's where it should be screened. Every primary care should be asking not only the colonoscopy, not only the mammogram, but this should be one of that question where you ask, what time do you go to bed? When do you get up? Do you snore? Do you have sleep apnea, right? So these screening, if it happens in a primary care physician's office, I think you catch everybody. I think that's where it should start, and then it should spread into community, and all these community-based programs will definitely help. And the program like this, right, educational workshops will definitely create awareness, but you're reaching only a small amount of people. But if you do in the primary care, you will reach everybody in the country.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raju. Dr. Shah, do you have any thoughts to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I think normalizing and accepting sleep as an important aspect of health is, I cannot emphasize that enough. Normalizing the fact that people need to sleep a third of their life. That's just the way the human body is designed. And if you see that as a waste of time, it will come with a price for most of us. Most of us cannot get away with 6 hours of sleep, even if we think we can, or if we have been getting away with it, because there is a toll that's silent and you're paying for it. So I think we need to set up initiatives that allow for the sleep duration, but also, as was mentioned earlier, the circadian rhythm is a very powerful sort of background rhythm that controls somebody's performance. So somebody who is a night owl, who is expected to show up at 6 in the morning or 8 in the morning even, and see patients, for example, in our practices, they're just not going to do as well as they would if they were starting at 10 a.m. So the same principle that we are applying to schools, there should be flexibility for start times. And I'll give you an example of a patient I recently saw in the city who came to me because he was being threatened and was asked to, come to work exactly at the same time, which was early in the morning, counter to his circadian rhythm. And the amount of stress this individual was facing was enormous. And, my job was to give him information to say this is normal. Your circadian rhythm is delayed, so you're not lazy. You're just not starting to work until later. And educate his supervisor to be able to understand that this is a normal pattern. And so what we did is we worked together to create an initiative for him that included letters from me documenting this condition with an ICSD code and to say that his start time for work will be 11 a.m. and that he will actually, that is still late, that is still early for him, that he should be allowed 15 to 20 minutes of grace period every single day for him to show up. And we were successful and he's much happier, right? And so I think we need to embrace that there's individual differences in how we sleep, what time we sleep, and how much sleep we need. And that affects everybody's performance. And if you want an organization that, or a society where everybody is optimized in their performance, but also mental health, well-being, we need to respect sleep and the inter-individual differences. And so I think the intervention is really, it needs to be at a larger scale and normalizing sleep. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shah. Dr. Tenbrink, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, great responses so far. I think it's a really key message that you don't have to wait until you're an adult to start protecting your heart. Habits like consistent sleep and emotion regulation skills and emotional awareness and burnout awareness and kind of thinking about productivity culture and how it infiltrates your life, they're all deeply connected. And you can talk with the people around you about your own awareness of how productivity culture infiltrates your decisions and your day to day. And I think Dr. Shah gave a great example of how to set boundaries or talk about what your personal priorities are and really think through those maybe with your family or with your friends, to share through stories and to kind of have accountability with other folks about taking sleep seriously and managing stress, as part of self-care. It's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's foundational to taking care of your health. I also wanted to say that understanding that having trouble sleeping or waking up and feeling really tired during the day, people consider those as such a normal part of life that they often might not realize these are treatable, and you can talk to your doctor about these issues, and they might be real signs of very serious underlying cardiovascular risks. And so taking seriously, I'm tired and I want to do something about it, and there's help to be had. There are lots of effective treatments to be had. And the last thing I want to mention, because my focus is on recovery after a cardiac event, that psychological recovery is just as crucial as the cardiac recovery. So it's really important as well there to seek help and talk to your doctor. I know personally it's a very difficult and weird thing to go through a potentially life-threatening experience and have to kind of get back to your regular life. And lots of your priorities may have changed. And it's not just you, it's your family, it's your parents, it's your children. We're all worried about you and thinking about you and concerned about your risk and potentially even hounding you in a way that caused a lot of fights. So all of these kind of complex family dynamics and social roles are really changed by a cardiac event. And so my message would also be to cardiologists to take this psychological part of recovery seriously, because it is a risk factor for recurrent events. And to ask your patients who've gone through an event, how are they doing? How are they sleeping? How's their partner coping? How are their kids coping? This is a whole family kind of impact when someone goes through a serious medical event. And to consider, psychological health might not be in your wheelhouse as a cardiologist, but it's actually a crucial part of supporting your patient's recovery as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tenbrink. And finally, Dr. Goodman, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just quick thoughts here. Firstly, Dr. Shah, I'm 100% agreeing with you that we got to get 7 to 9 hours. I was mentioning 5 hours because a lot of the data in terms of the increased risk is when people get less than 5 hours, but it's certainly not enough. And we've got to aim for that 7 to 8, 7 to 9 hours, as I said. I'd also like to make a suggestion that we have a program about how do you approach insomnia, because we're all talking about these increased risks, but we all have patients all the time having trouble sleeping. And it takes a lot of time to try to figure out what is their particular problem. I think it would be nice to do a program for people on some of the things that can help you deal with what's causing your insomnia. And clearly, one of them is sleep apnea. The question was, what community programs or interventions have you observed that address stress, sleep, and heart health? And I just wanted to make a plug. I have a monthly program where I present a topic like sleep and all sorts of other preventative topics to help people. It's exercise, it's diet, it's all that kind of stuff. And I do that once a month on Zoom, like we're doing here. And the address is nyulangone.org/heart health lectures. And anybody that's listening or that's interested could sign up for it. And at NYU, mindbody at nyulangone.org is a place that you could get in touch with a lot of the stress management, sleep, smoking, whatever programs that you need to help you. We all belong to big healthcare systems that are offering these things. But I think we want to give people practical suggestions. You could probably get in touch with any one of us so that you can attach yourself to places where there is this education available. I think everybody's really, hit the nail on the head with all the great questions that you've had. And Dr. Raju, just to actually agree with you, we should be asking every patient as part of just absolute part of the history, how much sleep are you getting? It's so important. And if they're having trouble, we should have somebody, if you don't have the time, to send them to. And I had someone in my practice that was a sleep specialist. It sounds like Dr. Shelby, you do this kind of thing. You're a resource because doctors don't have time. But you'd see all these people who are coming. It's all very well telling them at your increased risk, you need to get more sleep. But a lot of times they don't know how to do it. So I'll stop there.
Can I add one quick thing to piggyback on that? So there's two issues. One is not getting enough sleep. That's what we call insufficient sleep syndrome. And then there's insomnia, where you just can't sleep even when you're trying to get sleep. And so if you are doing all the sleep hygiene things, just like a quick little nugget, if you're doing all the sleep hygiene things by the book and it's not working after a few weeks, it's probably something else going on. And that's when you really should talk with your doctor, see a sleep specialist, because we can get a better diagnosis and we have other treatments. A lot of times the narrative is just sleep hygiene, but there are many effective treatments out there. So if sleep hygiene is not working for you, then definitely seek extra help on top of that.
Perfect. Thank you. We're kind of running out of time right now, so I would like to thank all of our panelists for all of your important contributions and helpful information. And to everyone who tuned in, I do see there's two questions that we were unable to answer, so feel free to people who ask those questions to reach out to us. We really hope that this conversation has provided all of you with some practical takeaways for supporting healthier stress and sleep habits in your own communities. To learn more about us, like our organization, Guardians of the Heart, and our upcoming initiatives, please visit our website. Thank you again, and we look forward to continuing this important work together. Have a great evening and rest of your weekend.